Your allergy isn't real, Elena. It never was. You just like the attention. My mother-in-law said that with a spoonful of green bean casserole halfway to her own mouth, at a table with 11 people on it, 3 days before Thanksgiving. She said it the way you'd correct someone about the score of a football game. Certain. Bored. Final. I set my fork down on the edge of my plate, careful not to let it clatter. I picked up my water glass, took one slow sip, and put it back exactly where it had been. I don't argue with people who won't tell the truth, I said. Nobody laughed. Nobody agreed. My husband, Tom, went very still beside me, the way he always did when his mother and I were circling something neither of us would name out loud. Diane just smiled, satisfied, like she'd won a point in a game only she knew we were playing. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd stopped eating anything she cooked 4 months earlier. What she didn't know was that I'd kept the wrapper from the granola bar that had put me in the ER in July, the one she swore she'd double-checked for peanuts. What she didn't know was that I am a detective, and detectives don't forget wrappers. She thought she was humiliating me at her own table. She had no idea she was building my case for me. Hey everyone, if you're new here, welcome. I tell true stories about family, betrayal, and the moment people finally stop being quiet. If that's your kind of story, stick around, and if you want more of these, hit subscribe before we get into it. Okay. Let me back up. My name is Elena Marsh. I'm 42 years old, and I've been a detective with the Cedar Falls Police Department for 11 years, 6 of them in crimes against persons. Before that I was a patrol officer for 7. I mention the job not to impress you, but because it matters later, because the way I was trained to think, the way I look for inconsistencies in a story, the way I never sign off on a theory until the evidence supports it, is the only reason I survived my mother-in-law. I married Tom Marsh 14 years ago. He's an electrician, steady and kind, the kind of man who fixes things quietly instead of announcing that he's fixed them. His mother, Diane, is 68, a retired school administrator, the kind of woman who ran a building of 400 children with a look. She raised Tom and his younger sister, Karen, alone after their father left when Tom was 9. She is, by every outward measure, a pillar. She organizes the family reunion every June. She remembers everyone's birthday. She has never once, in 14 years, missed a holiday. She has also never once, in 14 years, called me by a nickname, hugged me without an audience, or asked me a single question about my job that wasn't really about her. I have a severe peanut allergy. I've had it since I was 6 years old. I carry 2 EpiPens everywhere I go, one in my bag, one in my car, and I have for 36 years. It's not new. It's not a phase. It's not, as Diane liked to say at family gatherings, something I picked up to seem interesting. The first time she said something like that, I was 29 years old, 4 months into dating Tom, at a 4th of July barbecue in her backyard. I'd asked, politely, what was in the potato salad. She'd laughed, an easy, warm laugh, the kind that makes everyone else laugh with her before they know why, and said, "Oh, Elena, I promise, nobody's trying to poison you." 11 people laughed. I laughed too, because I didn't yet understand that I'd just watched the opening move of a 14-year game. For years, it stayed small. A comment here. A dish accidentally made with almond flour instead of the gluten-free flour I'd requested for a friend with celiac, at a dinner where Diane insisted the friend was being dramatic. A birthday cake in 2015 that arrived with a note reading "made with love," and real ingredients, unlike some people's excuses. A joke, she said, when I asked about it. Just a joke. In 2017, she told Karen's daughter, my niece by marriage, 10-year-old Mia, that Aunt Elena just doesn't like to eat food other people make. "Sweetie, it makes her feel special." Mia repeated it to me at the table, innocently, the way kids repeat the worst thing you've ever heard like it's the weather. I remember doing math in my head that night, not out of hurt, but out of habit. 14 years of marriage. 20-something holidays. Dozens of small comments. I had never once said them out loud to anyone. Not even Tom. Especially not Tom. Mia is the one person in that family who was ever kind to me without an angle. When I was recovering from a knee surgery in 2019 and couldn't drive for 6 weeks, she was the one who biked over 3 times a week with library books she thought I'd like, because, she said, Grandma says you like sad true crime stuff, so I got you some. She was 12. She noticed things adults in that family had trained themselves not to. Tom, for his part, loved his mother the way you love a house you grew up in even after it's flooded twice. He knew she could be sharp. He didn't know, because I never told him, because some fights you don't pick until you can win them, how sharp, or how often, or for how long. The pattern was always the same. Small comment. I'd let it go. Bigger comment. I'd let it go. A request that cost me something, driving her to appointments, hosting holidays at my house so she didn't have to lift a finger, lending Tom's college fund money to Karen twice, in 2016 and 2020, $11,000 total that was never paid back and never discussed again, and I'd absorb it, because that's what you do for family. Then, eventually, a betrayal. The betrayal, when it came for my body. It started small enough that I almost didn't notice, which, if you've ever investigated anything, is exactly how the real ones start. March of last year. Sunday dinner at Diane's house, her signature chicken piccata. 40 minutes after eating, my throat felt tight. Not closing tight. Just, aware. I've lived with this allergy long enough to know the difference between anxiety and onset, and this felt like onset. I took a Benadryl in her bathroom, told everyone I had a headache, and went home early. I didn't think poison. I thought cross-contamination. I thought maybe she'd used the same cutting board for something with almonds in it, an honest mistake. I mentioned it to her the next week, gently, the way you mention something to someone you're trying to give the benefit of the doubt. Elena, she said, patient, like I was a student who'd gotten a simple problem wrong. I have cooked in that kitchen for 40 years. I know what's in my food. In April, it happened again. A special seasoning blend on the pork tenderloin that made my lips tingle before I'd swallowed a full bite. I stopped eating, excused myself, and by the time I got to my car my hands were shaking hard enough that I dropped my keys twice. I sat there for 10 minutes, running my EpiPen through my fingers like a rosary, deciding whether I needed it. I didn't, that time. But I remember thinking, very clearly, the way you think about a case that suddenly has a second body, this isn't a coincidence anymore. That wasn't the part that bothered me most, though. The part that bothered me was what she said when I texted her that night, carefully, factually, the way you write something you might need to reread later. Hi Diane, I think there might have been some cross-contamination tonight, my lips were tingling pretty badly. Can you tell me what was in the seasoning blend? She wrote back, it's store-bought, it's fine, you're probably just stressed at work. You always get like this around your busy season. I have been a detective for 11 years. I know what it sounds like when someone answers a question you didn't ask. In May, at Mia's dance recital after party, I brought my own food, quietly, in a labeled container, the way I'd started doing at every family gathering since April without telling anyone why. Diane noticed. Of course she noticed. She said, in front of Karen and 2 of Karen's friends, Elena's brought her own little lunch again. Some of us just like to make a scene. Karen laughed. Not cruelly, just automatically, the way you laugh at a joke your mother's made 100 times before, because you stopped hearing the cruelty in it around joke number 30. I didn't laugh. I said, evenly, I'd rather bring my own food than end up in an ambulance again. It came out flatter than I meant it to. Diane's smile didn't move, but something behind her eyes did, a flicker, brief, gone fast. I filed it away. You learn, in my line of work, to notice the half-second before someone recovers their face. In June, my running total, the one I'd never said aloud, not even to myself, until that summer, sat somewhere around 4 incidents in 4 months, $11,000 of unpaid family loans that had somehow become invisible, and 14 years of small comments I had swallowed one at a time, the way you swallow a stone you tell yourself is just a pebble. Then, in July, the granola bar happened. Diane had started sending me home from Sunday dinners with what she called care packages, small containers of leftovers, individually labeled, since I'd started asking her to label everything. On July 9th, a Tuesday, I grabbed one of her granola bars from the pantry on my way out the door to a 12-hour shift, the way you grab something without thinking because you trust the label on it. I was in a briefing room 40 minutes later when my throat started closing for real this time, the kind of closing you don't mistake for anxiety, the kind where your own voice starts sounding like it's coming from somewhere else. A colleague used my EpiPen on me because my hands weren't steady enough. I was in the ER by 9:40 a.m. The label on the bar, which I still have, sealed in a plastic bag in a drawer I don't open casually, reads, "Peanut-free, safe for Elena," in Diane's handwriting. The lab report from the hospital, 3 days later, confirmed peanut protein in the sample. I'd had the presence of mind, even mid-reaction, even scared, to bag from the wrapper before the paramedics took it. I bagged it the way I'd bag evidence at a scene, because some habits don't turn off just because you're the one who's hurt. I didn't know yet what I was going to do with it. I just knew you don't throw away the one piece of a story that doesn't match what someone told you. That was the moment something changed. Not loudly. I didn't confront her. I didn't tell Tom, not yet. I went home, put the bag in a drawer, and started, very quietly, keeping a file. I want to be clear about something, because it matters to how this story ends. Diane is not, and was never, a cartoon. She brought soup to a co-worker of mine when his wife died, unprompted, and stayed to do his dishes. She paid for me as braces without being asked. She is, in almost every measurable way, a generous woman. That's what made this so hard to see clearly, and harder still to say out loud. The people who hurt you slowly are rarely the people who are cruel to everyone. They're the people who are wonderful to everyone except the one person standing between them and something they want. What Diane wanted, I would learn much later, was for her son's marriage to look, from the outside, like the family she never had. What she couldn't stand, what she genuinely, on some level, could not tolerate, was a version of family that had a condition attached to it. An allergy. A boundary. A no. To Diane, a no wasn't information. It was defiance. Family sits at one table, no matter what, she used to say, at every holiday, like a toast. I used to think it was sentimental. By August, I understood it as a mission statement, and I was the one variable that kept ruining it. By September, I'd stopped eating anything from Diane's kitchen entirely, including packaged items, including anything that had been in her house for more than an hour unsupervised. I told Tom I was being extra careful because of the granola bar thing, which was true, just not complete. I hadn't told him the label on that wrapper was in his mother's handwriting. I told myself I was protecting him. I know now I was also protecting the last version of my marriage that didn't have his mother's name written across it in accusation. That wasn't the part that worried me most, though. The part that worried me was what happened at Karen's birthday dinner on September 14th, when I brought my own plate again, and Diane, in front of 9 people, said, "You know, I looked it up. A lot of these adult-onset allergies are actually anxiety disorders. Maybe you should talk to someone instead of embarrassing Tom at every family dinner." Tom didn't defend me. He also didn't agree with her. He did what he always did, he went quiet, ate his food, and apologized to me in the car, the same apology I'd heard a dozen times in 14 years, "That's just how she is. I'll talk to her." He never talked to her. I don't think he knew how. I don't think, honestly, he let himself understand yet what "how she is" had already cost me. 3 days later, I found something I wasn't supposed to see. I was dropping off a container at Diane's house, an errand, nothing more, and she was in the shower. Her phone was on the kitchen counter, screen lit, a text thread open. I am not proud of reading it. I am also not sorry. It was a message to Karen, from 2 weeks earlier, that read, "She's so dramatic about the food thing. I swear half of it's in her head. If she'd just relax and eat what's put in front of her like a normal person, we wouldn't have this problem every single time." Karen's reply, "LOL Mom, you're bad." Just don't tell her what's in it, she can't be mad about something she doesn't know. I stood in that kitchen for maybe 8 seconds, memorizing the exact wording, the way you memorize a confession before the recorder catches up. Then I photographed the screen with my own phone, closed the app, and set hers back exactly where it had been, screen down, the way she'd left it. I want to tell you I felt vindicated. I didn't. I felt like I'd been handed the missing piece of a case I'd been quietly building for 6 months, and it answered one question: this wasn't carelessness, it had never been carelessness, while opening a much bigger one. If Karen knew. If Karen had known, for who knew how long, and had laughed about it instead of warning me. I didn't confront either of them that day. I drove home, sat in my driveway for 11 minutes, and then I did the thing I should have done in July. I called my department's evidence unit, off the clock, and asked a favor of a friend in the lab, a private one, not official, not yet, to help me understand exactly what I'd need if this ever became something more than a family argument. Documentation. Timestamps. A pattern, not just an incident. That was the day I stopped being a wife absorbing her mother-in-law's cruelty, and started being a detective building a file on a suspect who didn't know she was one. I told exactly one person, Mia. Not because she was an adult I trusted with legal strategy, she was 17 by then, sharp, angry on my behalf in the specific, righteous way teenagers get angry about injustices they've watched simmer their whole lives, but because she was the only person in that family who'd ever noticed me without wanting something. I didn't tell her everything. I told her enough. If your grandmother ever says anything to you about food, or about me, just remember dates if you can. That's all. Don't do anything. Just remember. She didn't ask why. She just nodded, the way people nod when they've been waiting a long time for permission to trust their own memory of a room. A few weeks later she started, unprompted, screenshotting things. A comment in the family group chat. A joke Diane made at a cousin's baby shower about Elena and her allergies, always something with that one. Small things. She was building something too, it turned out, without either of us calling it that yet. Something in Mia's own life shifted around then, too. She stopped laughing along at the group chat jokes the way she used to. Karen noticed and asked her, once, why she'd gotten so sensitive. Mia told me later that was the moment she realized she wasn't imagining the pattern either. It just took someone else naming it first. Through October, I stopped cooperating in every small way I could without announcing it. I stopped hosting. I stopped bringing dishes to pass. I started declining invitations with vague, unfalsifiable excuses. A shift got extended, I had a headache, Tom could go without me. I never said why. I let them believe whatever they wanted, which, predictably, was that I was being difficult. I also, quietly, consulted a lawyer. Not to sue anyone, not yet, not with what I had, but to understand, plainly, what evidence would matter if this ever went further than a family feud. She told me 3 things I didn't forget: documented medical records establishing the allergy severity and history, which I already had going back 36 years, a clear pattern of intent, not just negligence, which the texts and the granola bar label were starting to build, and, ideally, something contemporaneous, proof, close to the moment, that this was deliberate, not misremembered later by people protecting each other. I didn't tell Tom about the lawyer. I didn't tell him about the texts. I told myself I was waiting for the right moment. The truth, which I only understood much later, staring at my own reflection in a courthouse bathroom mirror, was that I hadn't yet let myself fully believe it. Some part of me, the part that had spent 14 years being the reasonable one, the accommodating one, the one who drove Diane to her cardiology appointments and never once brought up $11,000, still wanted, badly, for there to be an innocent explanation. I think I understood, somewhere around then, that I hadn't spent 14 years being patient with Diane because I was a patient person. I'd spent 14 years hoping that if I never gave her a reason to reject me, she eventually wouldn't. Being useful had never been kindness. It had been an application for a kind of belonging I was never actually being considered for. Meanwhile, the family assumed I'd come around, the way I always did. Diane started planning an enormous Thanksgiving, the big one, she called it, 22 people, both sides of the family, a professional-grade turkey fryer Tom's uncle was bringing over, new dishware she'd bought specifically for the occasion. She told Karen, in a call Mia happened to be in the room for and later told me about verbatim, Elena will be there. She always comes around by the holidays. She doesn't like making waves. They had, by every appearance, already won. They had no idea I'd already made a different decision. By November, I had the wrapper and lab report from July. Screenshots of the September text thread. A written, dated log of 11 separate incidents going back to March of the previous year, each with a date, a dish, a symptom, and, where possible, a witness. A statement from my ER physician confirming the July incident matched acute allergic reaction consistent with peanut exposure, not anxiety. And, as of the second week of November, a short, unguarded voicemail Diane had left on my phone by accident, meant for Karen, dialed wrong, that ran 19 seconds and included the sentence, "If she's not going to eat like everyone else, that's not on me, I'm not doing anything differently for one person's feelings." Not a confession to poisoning. But a confession, in her own voice, dated, timestamped, that she knew exactly what she was doing and had decided, consciously, to keep doing it. 3 days before Thanksgiving, at that Sunday dinner where this story started, she told me my allergy wasn't real. I said the sentence I'd started saying to her, quietly, for months by then, I don't argue with people who won't tell the truth, and I watched it land on her like nothing at all, because to Diane, I was still the same woman who always came around by the holidays. She had no idea the family sitting at her table that Thanksgiving was going to be the last one that ever sat there the way it always had. Thanksgiving landed on a Thursday that year, and Diane had been planning it since September. 22 people, both sides of the family, her new dishware, the professional turkey fryer, a seating chart she'd texted to the group chat a week early with a note that read, "Everyone in their place, just like always. Can't wait." I knew it was a trap the moment I saw the seating chart. Not a dramatic one. A quiet one, dressed up as tradition, me seated directly across from Diane, in clear view of everyone, in what I now recognize as a stage she'd built without fully admitting to herself that's what it was. She wanted an audience for whatever she was planning to say to me. I could feel it the way you feel a case about to break before you have the paperwork to prove it. I didn't tell Tom what I suspected. I told him, honestly, that I wasn't feeling great about the dinner, and he squeezed my hand and said, "It'll be fine, it's just food," which told me, gently and completely, that he still didn't know what just food had cost me. I decided, in the car on the way there, that this would be the last Thanksgiving he didn't know. I brought my own dish, in a container labeled in my own handwriting. I also brought, in my bag, a manila folder, the wrapper, the lab report, the screenshots printed on plain paper, the voicemail saved to a small recorder along with the physician's statement, and my own phone, charged, recording app open and ready, tucked in my coat pocket the way you carry something you hope you won't need and know you will. I also, quietly, that morning, called Mia. She was 20 by then, home from college for the holiday. "If today goes the way I think it's going to go," I told her, "I might need you to just tell people what you saw. Only if you want to. Only what's true." She said, without hesitating, I'd been waiting 2 years for someone to ask me that. The blue ceramic bowl, Diane's mother's, the one she'd kept in a glass front cabinet my entire marriage and never once let me touch, the one she used every Thanksgiving for the same cranberry relish her mother used to make, sat in the center of the table that day, the way it always did. I looked at it and thought about the first Thanksgiving I'd ever attended in that house, 14 years earlier, when Diane had proudly told me the story of that bowl, her mother's hands, her mother's kitchen, and I'd thought, foolishly, that a woman who loved her own mother's memory that tenderly could never be cruel to someone else's daughter-in-law. I was wrong about a lot of things that day. That was one of them. It happened over the pie. Diane stood to cut the pumpkin pie, her mother's recipe, same as the bowl, and, apropos of absolutely nothing, said, loudly enough for the whole table, "I made this one special, Elena, no nuts, I promise." Not that it would matter, since we all know it's not really an allergy anyway. 21 other people went quiet the specific way a room goes quiet when it senses something is about to happen that it can't take back. I didn't raise my voice. I set my napkin down, folded once, the way I always do, and I said, "Actually, I'd like to talk about that, since everyone's here." I opened the folder. I laid the granola bar wrapper on the table first, label up, her handwriting facing the room. Then the lab report. Then the printed screenshots of the text thread with Karen, which I read aloud, not all of it, just the 2 lines that mattered, in the same flat, factual voice I use when I read a suspect their own statement back to them in an interview room. Then I played the 19-second voicemail, once, at low volume, into a silence so complete I could hear the turkey fryer still ticking as it cooled in the garage. Karen went white. Tom's fork was still in his hand, frozen halfway to a plate he never finished. Diane's face did something I'd genuinely never seen it do in 14 years, it dropped its script entirely, for just a second, before she caught it and said, "Too fast, that is completely taken out of context, I would never." "I don't argue with people who won't tell the truth," I said. It came out quieter this time. Steadier. It wasn't a line anymore. It was a door closing. "Elena," Tom started, and I turned to him, gently, because none of this was his fault, not really, just his inheritance, and said, "I need you to hear all of it before you decide whose side this is. It was never supposed to have sides. She made it one." Mia spoke next, unprompted, her voice shaking but clear. "I have screenshots too. From the group chat. Going back 2 years. She didn't read them. She didn't need to. Just saying it, in that room, in front of Diane, did something no piece of paper could have. It told everyone at that table that this hadn't been one woman's private, dramatic grievance. It had been visible the whole time, to more than one person, for longer than anyone had let themselves admit. Diane's uncle, Tom's great-uncle Ray, 81 years old and normally silent at every family gathering, said into the quiet, "Diane. Is that true? About the food?" Not a question, really. A verdict waiting for confirmation. She didn't answer him. She looked at me instead, and for 1 second, one real, unguarded second, I saw something underneath the fury that looked almost like fear. Then it closed back over, and she said, "This is a family matter. It doesn't need to be a performance." "It stopped being a family matter," I said, "the day it became a medical incident with my name on the chart. That was when I understood I didn't need permission anymore. Not hers. Not Tom's. Not the family's collective agreement that this had gone far enough to matter. It had mattered in July. It had mattered every time before that, too. I'd just been the last one in the room to admit it. 2 nights later, my phone rang at 11:40 p.m. Diane's number. I almost didn't answer. I'm glad I did, because what happened on that call was the most honest conversation I ever had with her, and also, I'd learn within 48 hours, the most dishonest. She was crying, not performing, I don't think, not entirely. She told me things I'd never heard in 14 years. That her own mother, the one who owned that blue bowl, had spent the last 4 years of her life telling anyone who'd listen that her chronic fatigue was real, I promise it's real, and that Diane's father had rolled his eyes at every doctor's appointment, every symptom, until her mother died of what turned out to be an autoimmune condition nobody in that house had taken seriously enough, soon enough. I watched them call her dramatic for 4 years, Diane said, her voice breaking in a way I don't think I'd ever heard it break. I promised myself I'd never be soft on that kind of thing again. I thought if I didn't let it become a whole production every time, it would stop being real for me the way it was for her. I know that doesn't make sense. I know what I did was wrong. I sat in my kitchen, at midnight, and felt something in my chest come loose that had been tight for 14 years. It explained so much. Not the granola bar. Not the label in her own handwriting. But the shape of the fear underneath it, a woman who had watched a no-go unheard once, fatally, and had spent the rest of her life terrified of anyone else's no, because to her it had once meant somebody was about to disappear. I told her, gently, that I understood where it came from. I meant it. I still mean it. 2 days later, she called again, this time in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, her voice back to its usual composed register. "I've thought about it," she said, "and I think the healthiest thing, for everyone, is if we just put this behind us as a family. I've talked to a lawyer friend of mine, and honestly, Elena, if you pursue anything formal, it could really hurt Tom's relationship with Karen, with Mia, with all of us. I'm not asking for much. Just, don't take this any further. We go back to normal. I'll never bring up your allergy again, I promise you that. Just sign something saying this was a misunderstanding, for the family's sake." There it was. The apology hadn't been the truth arriving. It had been the down payment on my silence. "I don't argue with people who won't tell the truth," I said, one last time, quieter than either time before. "And I think you finally told me some of it. But I'm not signing anything." What came after happened the way these things actually do, which is slowly, and through institutions, not through anyone's dramatic reckoning at a dinner table. I filed an official report with my department's assistants in early December, not as a detective working a case, since that would have been a conflict, but as a complainant, referred out to a colleague in another jurisdiction to keep it clean. The physician's statement, the lab report, and the pattern log were enough, combined with the voicemail, for the district attorney's office to pursue reckless endangerment charges the following March. It wasn't attempted murder, the intent, legally, was murkier than that, and I never believed Diane wanted me dead, only that she wanted my no to stop existing, which is a different and in some ways sadder crime. She pleaded to a reduced charge that summer, reckless endangerment, a fine, 18 months of probation, and a court-ordered acknowledgement, read into the record, of what she'd done. The family did not survive it intact, and I want to be honest that I grieved that, even as I chose it. Karen didn't speak to me for 4 months. When she finally called, it wasn't an apology so much as an accounting. She told me she'd genuinely believed, for years, that I was a little much about the allergy, that Diane's version of events had simply been the only one she'd ever been given, and that reading her own texts printed on a page, in a quiet room, had been the first time she'd ever seen her own handwriting from the outside. "I don't know if we're close now. We're honest, which for us is new." Diane lost her standing at the center of that family in a way no court order could have engineered. The seating chart she used to send out every holiday simply stopped coming. Tom's Uncle Ray, the one who asked the one honest question at that table, started hosting Thanksgiving instead, a smaller version, without a professional turkey fryer or a blue ceramic bowl. Diane wasn't cut off entirely. She was invited, quietly, to the smaller gatherings, and came to some of them, and sat, for the first time in 14 years, at a table where nobody built the seating chart around her. Extended family tried, twice, to broker something resembling getting past it, a cousin's wedding invitation that came with a note asking if I could just be civil, for Tom's sake, it's water under the bridge by now. I declined, calmly, both times. Civil, I've learned, is not the same thing as safe, and I'm no longer willing to confuse the two just because a room full of people finds the confusion more comfortable than the truth. Tom and I are still married. It wasn't automatic. There was a period, about 4 months, where he had to sit with what his silence had cost me for 14 years, and I had to sit with what my silence had cost us both. We went to therapy, actual therapy, not the kind you do in a car on the way home from his mother's house. He goes to Diane's court-mandated check-ins with her sometimes, as her son, not as my witness. That's his relationship to Carrie. I've made peace with not carrying it for him anymore. It's been a little over a year now. Tom and I moved, 8 months ago, into a smaller house across town, nothing dramatic, just ours, chosen without anyone else's seating chart in mind. I cook in that kitchen constantly, for the first time in over a decade without checking a label twice out of habit born from fear instead of care. Mia is 21 now, studying criminal justice, which she swears has nothing to do with me, and which I don't believe for a second, and don't say so, because some gifts you just let someone give you quietly. She came over last month, unprompted, the way she used to bike over with library books, just to help me repaint a bookshelf. We didn't talk about any of it. We didn't need to. That's the whole point of the people who were kind to you before it cost them anything. You don't have to keep explaining yourself to them afterward. I have the blue ceramic bowl now. Diane gave it to me, mailed it actually, no note, about 6 months after the sentencing, and I don't fully know what she meant by it, an apology, a surrender, an attempt to still be remembered kindly by the only person who ever made her answer for anything. I use it. I made cranberry relish in it last Thanksgiving, my own recipe, nothing like her mother's, for 6 people at a small table in a house Diane has never been inside. It isn't a symbol of forgiveness. It's a symbol of the fact that things can be reclaimed without the person who once controlled them ever getting credit for the reclaiming. I still think about her, some nights, alone, the private kind of thinking I never let anyone see, not forgiveness, not quite, but something adjacent to grief. Not for the woman who wrote "safe for Elena" on a wrapper she knew wasn't. For the woman on the other end of that midnight phone call, the one who watched her own mother go unhurt until it killed her, and never learned any way to survive that except to make sure nobody's no ever outranked hers again. I grieve the version of her that could have existed if someone had believed her mother sooner. I don't excuse what she did to me. Both things are true. People who love you don't need you to prove you're in pain before they believe you. If someone keeps asking you to prove it, that's not confusion. That's a choice they're making, over and over, and you're allowed to stop waiting for it to change. If this story hit close to home, tell me in the comments, I read every one. And if you want more stories like this, hit like, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe, because there's a lot more where this came from.